Africa occupies a central position on the world map, and it is the only continent which is divided into almost two equal halves or parts by the line of equator. As we all remember, what is equator? Equator is the imaginary line which runs midway between the poles and divides the earth into two equal hemispheres known as the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, and the prime meridian divides it into the eastern hemisphere and the western hemisphere. Now Africa is the only continent which runs in all these hemispheres. Since Africa is broad in the north and is tapering towards the south, therefore there is more landmass in the northern hemisphere than in the southern hemisphere. Moving on to the latitudinal and longitudinal extent, the lines of latitude are the imaginary lines joining all places having the same latitude towards the north or south of the equator. And these lines are parallel to the equator. The most important lines of latitude in Africa are your equator, 23.5 degrees north, that is your Tropic of Cancer, and 23.5 degrees south, Tropic of Capricorn. The continent of Africa lies between two big oceans, that is your Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean. Now moving on to the latitudinal extent of Africa, that is it lies between 37 degrees north to 35 degrees south latitude, and it extends between 17 degrees west and 51 degrees east. The longitudinal extent is 17 degrees west and 51 degrees east. The prime meridian, which is the line of longitude whose angular distance is defined as 0 degrees. Now we all remember learning this in class 6. It passes through Greenwich near London. Now the same line passes through Africa on its western side. Now it passes through Accra, the capital of Ghana. Now these two 0 degrees line, that is your equator and the prime meridian. Equator is also 0 degrees and the prime meridian is also 0 degrees. Now these two lines meet, or in fact intersect, in the Gulf of Guinea. And this point is named as the Null Island. Very interesting fact. I have attached a few links for your extra reference on this null point. Coming back to the boundaries of Africa, Africa is almost surrounded by seas and oceans. It has the Mediterranean Sea in the north. On the west lies the Atlantic Ocean, I have already mentioned that, and the Indian Ocean to the east. The Strait of Gibraltar between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea separates it from Europe. Here is your Strait of Gibraltar. I hope we all remember what is a strait. A strait is a narrow stretch of water that joins two large water bodies. So here, when we repeat that the Strait of Gibraltar between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea separates it from Europe. So what is it doing? It has two large water bodies and two massive landforms, that is Africa and Europe, being separated by the Strait of Gibraltar. And this you have learnt in class 6 already. Now coming to the Strait of the Red Sea. When we are talking about the Red Sea, Onto the eastern side, we have the Red Sea, and the Red Sea separates Africa from the Arabian Peninsula. So here we have the Strait of Gibraltar separating Europe and Africa, and here we have the Red Sea separating the Arabian Peninsula and Africa. The Suez Canal we'll talk about later in detail. Now that is the joining point. Today I have only introduced the water bodies surrounding Africa. Number one being your Mediterranean Sea. You'll move in the clockwise manner. Secondly, your Red Sea. Next, we have the Gulf of Aden here. Then we have the Indian Ocean, the Mozambique Channel separating Madagascar Island from Africa. Moving on to your western side, we have the South Atlantic Ocean here. Along here, we have the North Atlantic Ocean. We all remember equator separates it. Two different hemispheres, northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. I have specifically only written South Atlantic Ocean here. I didn't have place here. If you have, you can easily write North Atlantic Ocean here. And the next one is the Strait of Gibraltar. We're only going to mention in our map the surrounding water bodies. And along with that, you can even trace the two major lakes, that is the Lake Victoria, which provides water to the Nile River and makes it a perennial river. We'll talk about it in length. The entire class we'll give to the Nile River. And the Lake Chad. Along with that, you can even mark your River Niger. One more river which is a little more important, that is orange, you can mark. I'm not making you mark the Congo River because that we will discuss and then mark together in class. So if you have this much of a map ready with you, the next class will be more interesting and it will be much easier for you to follow in which direction I am moving and talking about, specifically when we talk about all the parts of Africa, that is the northern, southern, eastern and western. So let's mark the latitudinal and longitudinal extent clearly along with the surrounding water bodies, three main rivers, two lakes and two gulfs. You should also mark the most important lines of latitude, that is your equator, Tropic of Capricorn and Tropic of Cancer. Thank you for today.